Jeffrey Davis's hand freezes mid-stroke as the door to his quarters slides open with a soft hiss. His eyes widen in shock, meeting the large, expressive gaze of Vega, his Xindi maid. The blue-skinned alien stands motionless, her iridescent scales shimmering under the harsh light of Nexus Prime's artificial day cycle. I forgot to engage the privacy locks, Jeffrey stammers, his face flushing deep red as he fumbles to cover himself with a nearby datapad. Vega's initial surprise morphs into something else. Curiosity, her head tilts, eyes roaming over Jeffrey's exposed form. This human activity, it intrigues me, she says, her melodic voice tinged with unmistakable interest. May I join you? Jeffrey's mind reels. As an assistant to the human ambassador on this massive space station orbiting a neutron star, he's acutely aware of the delicate nature of interspecies relations. Humans, newcomers to the galactic stage, already walk a tightrope of diplomacy among the older, established alien races. A liaison with Vega could shatter that precarious balance. Yet as Vega steps closer, Jeffrey feels an undeniable pull. Her alien beauty captivates him, the way her scales catch the light, the depth in her eyes. Before he can form a coherent thought, they're entangled in a passionate embrace, cultural taboos crumbling in the wake of their desire. Hours later, as they lay entwined, the gravity of their actions begins to sink in. Jeffrey's comm unit buzzes incessantly, a flurry of urgent messages flooding the screen. Word of their encounter has spread through Nexus Prime's efficient rumor mill, igniting a diplomatic firestorm. The Xindi High Council's response is swift and furious. They demand Jeffrey's immediate expulsion from the station, decrying him as a corrupting influence on their people. The timing couldn't be worse. Earth is on the cusp of securing a coveted seat on the Galactic Security Council, a position that would elevate humanity's status in interstellar affairs. Jeffrey dresses hurriedly, his mind racing. He needs to get to the ambassador, to explain, to find a way to salvage this situation. As he rushes through Nexus Prime's sprawling corridors, he catches snippets of conversations in a dozen alien languages. Disapproving glances follow him, the weight of judgment from species who've long viewed humans as second-class citizens. Reaching the human embassy, Jeffrey finds chaos. Staff members scurry about, fielding calls from Earth and trying to appease outraged alien diplomats. The ambassador, a usually composed woman, paces behind her desk, her face etched with worry. "Davis," she snaps as Jeffrey enters, "do you have any idea what you've done? Years of careful negotiation, hanging by a thread because you couldn't keep it in your pants?" Jeffrey opens his mouth to respond, but the ambassador cuts him off. "The Xindi are threatening to veto our council bid unless we hand you over. Earth is considering cutting losses, sacrificing you to save the deal." The words hit Jeffrey like a punch to the gut. He's become a liability to his own species, a bargaining chip in the high-stakes game of galactic politics. But as he processes this, another realization dawns. His personal scandal has obscured a larger issue. In the embassy's data feeds, Jeffrey spots an anomaly. Encrypted communications between a rival alien faction discussing ways to exploit the situation. They're planning to use his indiscretion as a pretext to sabotage humanity's bid for the council seat. Jeffrey's personal crisis has become entangled with the fate of human-alien relations and Earth's future standing in the galactic community. As he stares at the data, mind whirling with implications, he knows he faces an impossible task: expose the conspiracy, protect his budding relationship with Vega, and somehow secure humanity's position in the galaxy, all while avoiding the wrath of the Xindi High Council and potential betrayal by his own people. The stakes have never been higher, and time is running out. Jeffrey takes a deep breath, squaring his shoulders. It's time to prove that humanity deserves its place among the stars. Jeffrey's mind raced as he processed the encrypted communications he'd discovered. The conspiracy to sabotage humanity's council bid loomed large, but he had no time to dwell on it. The embassy erupted into a flurry of activity as news of his indiscretion spread like wildfire through Nexus Prime's gossip channels. Before he could formulate a plan, a stern voice crackled over the embassy's intercom system. Jeffrey Davis, report to Security Office Alpha immediately. This is not a request. Jeffrey's stomach dropped. He recognized the voice. Commander Zaxthor, the Arcturian head of station security. Known for his unwavering adherence to interspecies protocols, Zaxthor was the last person Jeffrey wanted to face right now. As he made his way through Nexus Prime's winding corridors, Jeffrey felt the weight of countless alien stares. Whispers in a dozen languages followed him, the words human and Zindi recurring in hushed tones. Security Office Alpha loomed before him, its sleek metallic doors sliding open with an ominous hiss. Inside, Commander Zaxthor's piercing gaze fixed on Jeffrey. The Arcturian's iridescent skin shimmered under the harsh lighting, his four eyes narrowing in scrutiny. Sit, Zaxthor commanded, gesturing to a chair with one of his upper limbs. Jeffrey complied, his palms sweating as he lowered himself into the seat. The room's oppressive silence was broken only by the soft hum of holographic displays, flickering to life around them. Mr. Davis, Zaxthor began, his voice a low rumble. Do you understand the gravity of your actions? Jeffrey opened his mouth to respond, but Zaxthor cut him off with a sharp gesture. This is not the time for excuses. Your liaison with the Zindi female has created a diplomatic incident of unprecedented proportions. The commander manipulated a holographic interface, bringing up a series of reports and communiques. The Zindi High Council is demanding your immediate expulsion from Nexus Prime. They claim you have corrupted one of their citizens. Jeffrey's heart raced. He thought of Vega, wondering where she was, if she was safe. Commander, Silence, Zaxthor snapped. You will speak only when asked a direct question. Now explain to me in detail the nature of your relationship with the Zindi female designated Vega. For the next hour, Jeffrey endured a grueling interrogation. Zaxthor's questions were probing, relentless, designed to expose any inconsistencies in his story. Jeffrey struggled to maintain his composure, acutely aware that one wrong word could spell disaster, not just for him, but for humanity's standing in the galactic community. As the interrogation wound down, Zaxthor leaned back, his expression unreadable. You are dismissed for now, Mr. Davis, but do not leave the human sector without express permission. This investigation is just getting started. Exhausted and shaken, Jeffrey stumbled out of the security office. He made his way back to the human embassy, only to find chaos reigning. Staff members rushed about, fielding urgent communications from Earth and trying to placate outraged alien diplomats. Ambassador Marcus Holloway, a distinguished man in his mid-50s with salt and pepper hair, emerged from his office. His face was a mask of awe-inspiring fury. Davis, he barked, my office, now! Once inside, Holloway didn't mince words. You're being reassigned. Effective immediately, you'll be working in the embassy's archives. It's the best I can do to appease the Zindi without outright handing you over. Jeffrey's mind whirled. The demotion stung, but he knew he had bigger problems. The conspiracy he'd uncovered still loomed large, and now he had even less access to the resources he needed to expose it. As he left Holloway's office, a familiar face caught his eye. Dr. Lyra Novak, a brilliant xenobiologist and trusted friend, motioned him over to her workstation. Jeffrey, she whispered, her eyes darting around to ensure they weren't overheard. I've been analyzing the station's communication logs like you asked. There's something you need to see. She pulled up a series of encrypted transmissions on her screen. Look at this pattern. It's a high-ranking Zindi official communicating with an unknown external source. The encryption is sophisticated, but I'm working on breaking it. Jeffrey's pulse quickened. This could be the evidence he needed. Keep digging, Lyra. This might be our only chance to uncover the truth. As he turned to leave, a hulking figure blocked his path. Jeffrey found himself face-to-face with Grell, a Taurian bouncer known for his work in the station's seedier establishments. Grell's voice was a low growl. Word of advice, human. Stop poking around where you don't belong. Some secrets are best left buried. Before Jeffrey could respond, Grell lumbered away, leaving behind an implicit threat hanging in the air. Undeterred, Jeffrey knew he had to press on. He began reaching out to his network of alien contacts, carefully probing for information about any upcoming clandestine meetings. As he worked, his thoughts drifted to Vega. He hadn't heard from her since their encounter, and worry gnawed at him. Late that night, as Jeffrey pored over data in his cramped quarters, his personal comm unit buzzed. A message appeared, encrypted and anonymous. Lower levels, maintenance shaft, 7B, 2 hours, come alone. Jeffrey's heart raced. It could be a trap, but it could also be the break he'd been looking for. With everything at stake, he knew he had no choice but to take the risk. As he prepared to venture into the depths of Nexus Prime, Jeffrey steeled himself for what lay ahead. The fate of human-alien relations hung in the balance, and he was walking a razor's edge between exposing a conspiracy and becoming its next victim. Steeling his nerves, Jeffrey made his way to the lower levels of Nexus Prime. The maintenance shaft was dimly lit, casting long shadows as Jeffrey cautiously approached. His heart pounded in his chest, every sense on high alert. As he reached the designated meeting point, a figure emerged from the darkness. "I was beginning to think you wouldn't show," a familiar voice said. It was Grell, the Taurian bouncer. Jeffrey tensed, ready to flee, but Grell raised his hands in a placating gesture. "Easy, human. I'm not here to hurt you. I've got information you need to hear." For the next few minutes, Grell spoke in hushed tones, revealing a conspiracy far more extensive than Jeffrey had imagined. As he listened, Jeffrey surreptitiously activated the recording function on his comm unit, capturing every word. Suddenly, a noise echoed through the shaft. Grell's eyes widened. "We've been made! Run!" Jeffrey didn't need to be told twice. He sprinted down the corridor, the sound of heavy footsteps close behind. Rounding a corner, he spotted an access hatch and dove through it, sealing it behind him. Heart racing, Jeffrey made his way back to his quarters, the recorded conversation securely stored on his comm unit. As he settled in to analyze the data, the full scope of the conspiracy began to unfold before him. The recording revealed plans not just to sabotage humanity's bid for the Galactic Security Council seat, but a coordinated attack on key human outposts across the galaxy. The conspirators aimed to destabilize Earth's growing influence, potentially setting human-alien relations back by decades. Jeffrey's mind reeled at the implications. This information needed to reach Ambassador Holloway immediately. He attempted to establish a secure channel to the human embassy, but found all communication lines mysteriously blocked. "Damn it," Jeffrey muttered, suspecting internal sabotage. He needed help, and he knew just who to turn to. Dr. Lyra Novak answered his call on the first ring. "Jeffrey, what's wrong?" "Lyra, I need your help bypassing a communication blackout. It's urgent." As Dr. Novak worked her technological magic, Jeffrey's comm unit buzzed with an incoming message. It was from Vega. "Jeffrey, we have a problem," her message read. "Xindi authorities are planning to forcibly deport all humans from Nexus Prime. They're using your scandal as a pretext. We don't have much time." Jeffrey's stomach dropped. The conspiracy was moving faster than he'd anticipated. With Dr. Novak still working on establishing a secure line to the embassy, he knew he needed to act quickly. A daring plan began to form in his mind. If he couldn't reach the ambassador, he'd have to take matters into his own hands. He'd broadcast the evidence to every species on Nexus Prime simultaneously, exposing the plot and rallying support for humanity. But to do that, he'd need access to the station's central communication hub, a heavily guarded facility in the neutral zone of Nexus Prime. It was a risky move, but with time running out, it was their best chance. "Lyra," Jeffrey said, his voice filled with commitment. "Change of plans. I need you for something bigger." As Jeffrey outlined his plan, Dr. Novak's eyes widened. "You're insane," she said, but there was a hint of excitement in her voice. "I'm in." With Lyra on board, Jeffrey reached out to Vega. Despite the risk to her own standing among the Xindi, she agreed to help without hesitation. The final piece of the puzzle came in the form of Zorn, a disgraced Arcturian ex-security officer. Jeffrey had crossed paths with him during his earlier investigations and knew of his lingering resentment towards the station's security force. "You want to infiltrate the central comm hub?" Zorn asked, his four eyes blinking in surprise. "That's suicide." "It's our only chance," Jeffrey replied. "You in?" Zorn considered for a moment, then nodded. For a shot at redemption? Count me in. As the team prepared for their mission, tension on Nexus Prime reached a boiling point. Reports of anti-human riots flooded in from various sectors. The conspirators' misinformation campaign was working all too well. Jeffrey led his small team through the back corridors of Nexus Prime, relying on Zorn's inside knowledge to avoid security patrols. As they approached the lower levels of the communication hub, the distant sound of shouting and breaking glass served as a stark reminder of what was at stake. Using Zorn's access codes, they slipped into the restricted area. The corridors were eerily quiet, their footsteps echoing in the silence. "Something's not right," Vega whispered, her hand hovering near the concealed weapon at her hip. As if on cue, a group of heavily armed mercenaries rounded the corner. For a split second, both groups froze in surprise. Then chaos erupted. Blaster fire filled the air as Jeffrey and his team dove for cover. Vega moved with surprising agility, her combat training evident as she returned fire with deadly accuracy. "This way!" Zorn shouted, indicating a side passage. They retreated, using their knowledge of the station's layout to outmaneuver their attackers. As they fought their way through the lower levels, Jeffrey couldn't help but be impressed by Vega's combat skills. She moved with a grace and precision he'd never seen before. "Special Forces training," she explained between bursts of fire. "I left that life behind, but some skills you never forget." They pushed on, the sound of pursuit never far behind. As they approached the main control room, a blast door slammed shut, cutting Jeffrey and Vega off from the rest of the team. "Go!" Jeffrey shouted to Lyra and Zorn through the intercom. "We'll find another way around." Trapped in a maintenance corridor with enemy forces closing in, Jeffrey and Vega shared a look of understanding. The danger and adrenaline heightened the connection between them, unspoken feelings bubbling to the surface. In a moment of intensity, they came together in a passionate kiss. It was brief but filled with the weight of everything left unsaid between them. "We should," Jeffrey began as they separated. "Focus on the mission," Vega finished, a small smile on her lips. They pressed on, acutely aware that their next actions would determine not just their own fate, but the future of human-alien relations in the galaxy. As they navigated the winding corridors, the sound of approaching reinforcements grew louder. Time was running out. The control room, and their chance to expose the conspiracy, lay just ahead, but so did an unknown number of enemies. Jeffrey and Vega exchanged a determined look. Whatever came next, they would face it together. With a nod, they readied their weapons and prepared to make their final push towards the control room, the fate of humanity's place in the galactic community hanging in the balance. Balance. With a shared nod of perseverance, Jeffrey and Vega burst through the final set of doors into the main control room of the communication hub. The room was a hive of activity, with technicians hunched over consoles, their fingers flying across holographic interfaces. At the sound of the doors slamming open, heads snapped up in unison, eyes widening in shock. "Nobody move," Vega commanded, her voice ringing with authority as she leveled her weapon at the startled staff. Jeffrey sprinted to the central console, his heart pounding in his ears. "Lyra, we're in. Talk me through this," he said into his comm unit, fingers poised over the controls. Dr. Novak's voice crackled through the speaker. "All right, Jeffrey. Look for the primary broadcast interface. It should be a large circular panel with a pulsing blue light." As Jeffrey scanned the complex array of controls, Vega efficiently secured the room. With practiced ease, she used strips of cord from her utility belt to bind the technicians, her movements swift and precise. "Found it," Jeffrey called out, his hand hovering over the glowing blue panel. "Good," Lyra replied. "Now, insert your comm unit into the data port on the right side. I'll remotely initiate the upload sequence." Jeffrey complied, watching as lines of code began streaming across the main view screen. The incriminating evidence they'd gathered, recordings, encrypted transmissions, financial transactions, all began flooding into the station's broadcast system. Suddenly, an ear-splitting alarm blared throughout the facility. Red warning lights bathed the room in an ominous glow. "They've detected us," Vega said, her voice tense as she took up a defensive position by the door. Jeffrey's fingers flew over the console, following Lyra's rapid-fire instructions. "How much longer?" "2 minutes," Lyra responded. "Maybe less if we're lucky." The sound of heavy footsteps echoed from the corridor outside. Vega tightened her grip on her weapon, preparing for the inevitable confrontation. The door burst open, and a squad of security officers poured in, led by a familiar face, Commander Zaxthor. Jeffrey's heart sank, certain their mission had failed. But instead of ordering their arrest, Zaxthor raised his hand, signaling his team to stand down. "Hold your fire," he commanded, his multifaceted eyes fixed on Jeffrey and Vega. "Commander?" Vega asked, her weapon still raised. Zaxthor's mandibles clicked in what Jeffrey had come to recognize as a sign of agitation. "I've been conducting my own investigation," he said, his voice low and urgent. "There's corruption in my ranks, stretching to the highest levels. Whatever you're doing, it needs to happen. Now." Jeffrey blinked in surprise but didn't hesitate. He turned back to the console, redoubling his efforts to complete the upload. 30 seconds? Lyra's voice came through the comm. Zaxthor moved to the door, his team forming a protective perimeter. "We'll hold them off. Finish this." No sooner had he spoken than the sounds of conflict erupted from the corridor. Blaster fire and shouts echoed through the air as Zaxthor's loyalists clashed with the approaching mercenaries. Vega sprinted to join the defense, her combat training evident in every fluid movement. She took position beside Zaxthor, their previous animosity forgotten in the face of a common enemy. 10 seconds, Lyra called out. Jeffrey watched the progress bar creep towards completion, each second feeling like an eternity. The sounds of battle grew closer, punctuated by the hiss of energy weapons and the dull thuds of hand-to-hand combat. 5, 4, 3... A stray blast struck the wall near Jeffrey, showering him with sparks. He ducked, shielding the console with his body. 2, 1... The console emitted a high-pitched tone, and the main view screen flickered to life. Jeffrey looked up to see his own face staring back at him. Then a cascade of images and data began to flow across every screen in the room. "It's done," he breathed, a mix of relief and adrenaline coursing through him. Throughout Nexus Prime, every display device, from the massive public screens in the central plaza to personal comm units, began broadcasting the evidence. The identities of the conspirators, their plans, the forged documents, everything was laid bare for all species to see. In the control room, the fighting ceased as both sides turned to watch the unfolding revelation. Jeffrey moved to stand beside Vega, their hands finding each other in the moment of stunned silence. The quiet was short-lived. As the full impact of the broadcast hit home, chaos erupted throughout the station. The comm channels exploded with chatter, reports of riots and protests flooding in from every sector. Zaxthor turned to Jeffrey and Vega, his expression unreadable. "You've done it. For better or worse, you've changed everything." Before either of them could respond, Jeffrey's comm unit buzzed with an incoming transmission. It was Ambassador Holloway. "Davis," the ambassador's voice was taut with urgency. "I don't know how you did this, but the situation is critical. The human embassy is barely holding off a mob, and the Xindi High Council is in uproar. Get back here immediately. We need to contain this before it spirals completely out of control." As Jeffrey acknowledged the order, another message flashed across his screen. This one was from Earth's central government, marked with the highest priority. The message was brief, but its implications enormous. "Davis, leverage this crisis. Push for immediate consideration of Earth's Galactic Security Council bid. This is our moment. Do not fail." Jeffrey felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. He looked at Vega, seeing the mixture of triumph and uncertainty in her eyes. They had exposed the conspiracy, but the real challenge was just beginning. "We need to move," Jeffrey said, his mind racing with the possible ramifications of their actions. As they prepared to leave the control room, navigating the chaos they had unleashed, Jeffrey knew that the next few hours would determine not just their fate, but the future of human-alien relations in the galaxy. With Vega by his side, he stepped into the corridor, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead. With Vega by his side, Jeffrey stepped into the corridor, ready to face the chaos they had unleashed. The journey to the human embassy was fraught with tension. Everywhere they looked, screens flickered with the damning evidence they had broadcasted. Aliens of various species huddled in groups, their voices a cacophony of shock, anger, and disbelief. More than once, Jeffrey and Vega had to duck into side passages to avoid confrontations with agitated crowds. As they approached the embassy, the sound of raised voices and pounding fists against barriers grew louder. A sea of protesters, predominantly Shindy, surged against the security perimeter. Embassy guards, their faces grim, held the line with energy shields and non-lethal weapons. Jeffrey tapped his comm unit. "Ambassador Holloway, we're outside. How do we get in?" "Stand by," came the terse reply. Moments later, a section of the barrier shimmered and parted. "Move quickly!" They sprinted through the opening, which sealed shut behind them with a crackle of energy. Inside the embassy's atrium, the atmosphere was no less tense. Staff members rushed about, their faces etched with worry as they fielded an endless stream of incoming communications. Ambassador Holloway met them at the entrance to the main conference room. His usually impeccable appearance was disheveled, his eyes bloodshot from lack of sleep. "Davis, Vega, get in here. We're about to begin." The conference room was a hive of activity. Dr. Lyra Novak hunched over a datapad, her fingers flying across its surface as she compiled information. Commander Zaxthor stood by the window, his multifaceted eyes scanning the crowd outside. Several human diplomats occupied the remaining seats, their hushed conversations ceasing as Jeffrey and Vega entered. "Let's get started," Holloway said, activating the room's holodisplay. "The situation is critical. Davis, your broadcast has thrown the entire station into upheaval. The Xindi High Council is in an uproar, and we're barely keeping the mob at bay." Jeffrey nodded, his throat dry. "Sir, Holloway cut him off with a wave. "Save it. What's done is done. Now we need to focus on damage control and leveraging this situation to our advantage." The ambassador's eyes swept the room before settling on Jeffrey. "Earth Central has made their position clear. They want us to use this crisis to push for immediate consideration of our bid for the Galactic Security Council." A murmur ran through the assembled diplomats. Vega stiffened beside Jeffrey, her expression unreadable. Holloway continued, "Davis, I need you to prepare a comprehensive proposal. Emphasize our role in uncovering this conspiracy and our commitment to interspecies cooperation. We need to strike while the iron is hot." Jeffrey's mind raced, already formulating arguments and strategies. He opened his mouth to respond when Vega suddenly tensed, her hand flying to her ear. "Ambassador," she said, her voice tight, "I'm receiving a priority transmission from the Xindi High Council." Holloway frowned. "Put it through." The holodisplay flickered, replaced by the stern visage of a high-ranking Xindi official. His mandibles clicked in agitation as he spoke. "Ambassador Holloway, this is Counselor Vextor of the Xindi High Council. We demand the immediate extradition of the traitor Vega for trial on Xindi Prime. Her actions have brought shame upon our people and jeopardized galactic stability." Jeffrey instinctively moved closer to Vega, his hand brushing against hers. Holloway's eyes narrowed as he considered the demand. "Counselor," he began, his tone measured. "Agent Vega's actions were instrumental in uncovering a plot that threatened not just humanity, but all species in this sector. We reject your characterization of her as a traitor." Vextor's mandibles clacked furiously. "This is not a request, Ambassador. Comply or face severe diplomatic consequences." The transmission cut off abruptly, leaving the room in stunned silence. All eyes turned to Vega, who stood perfectly upright, her face a mask of control. Jeffrey turned to Holloway, his decision made before he even spoke. "Sir, we can't hand her over. Vega risked everything to help us. We owe her our protection." Holloway rubbed his temples, the weight of the situation evident in his posture. After a long moment, he nodded. "Agreed. Vega, I'm granting you temporary asylum within the human sector of Nexus Prime. It's not a permanent solution, but it will buy us time." Relief flooded through Jeffrey, but it was short-lived. An alarm blared through the embassy, followed by the sound of shattering glass and angry shouts. Commander Zaxthor spun away from the window. "Ambassador, A group of Xindi extremists has breached the outer perimeter. They're attempting to storm the embassy. Holloway's face hardened. Security, Protocol, Omega. Davis, Vega, we need your help. You two have the most combat experience here. Jeffrey and Vega shared a quick glance, a world of unspoken communication passing between them. They nodded in unison and moved towards the door, falling into step with the embassy's security team. As they raced towards the growing sounds of conflict, Jeffrey's mind whirled with the implications of what was unfolding. The conspiracy, Earth Security Council bid, Vega's asylum, and now an attack on the embassy. Events were spiraling at a dizzying pace. They rounded a corner to find the embassy's main entrance in chaos. The security barrier had failed, and a wave of angry Xindi surged into the atrium. Embassy guards struggled to hold the line, their non-lethal weapons proving ineffective against the sheer numbers of the attackers. Jeffrey and Vega didn't hesitate. They leapt into the fray, their combat trainings kicking in automatically. Vega moved with lethal grace, her strikes precise and devastating. Jeffrey found himself back-to-back with her, their movements synchronized as if they'd fought together for years. As they battled to push back the intruders, Jeffrey caught glimpses of the scene outside through the shattered windows. The entire station seemed to be in uproar, with crowds gathering in every visible sector. Screens throughout the atrium flickered with urgent news bulletins, hinting at the far-reaching consequences of their actions. In that moment, as he fought alongside Vega to defend the embassy, Jeffrey realized that their actions had set in motion events that would reshape not just Nexus Prime, but potentially the entire galactic political landscape. The true challenge, he knew, was only just beginning. As Jeffrey and Vega fended off the Xindi attackers in the embassy's atrium. Amidst the chaos, Jeffrey's comm unit buzzed urgently. He ducked behind an overturned desk, pulling Vega with him as he answered the call. Dr. Novak's voice crackled through, tense and hurried. Jeffrey, we've uncovered critical information. Zar-El is likely involved in the conspiracy. Vega's scheduled meeting with him could be a trap. Jeffrey's blood ran cold. He glanced at Vega, who was already scanning the room for an exit. Understood, Doctor. We're on our way. With a nod to the embassy security team, Jeffrey and Vega made a break for the service exit. As they raced through the corridors, Jeffrey's mind whirled with possibilities. They needed a plan, and fast. We can't use the main communication channels, Vega said, her breath coming in short bursts as they ran. The neutral zone will be a dead zone. Jeffrey nodded grimly. We need help, someone who can bypass the security protocols. They skidded to a halt outside Commander Zaxthor's office. The Arcturian looked up, his multifaceted eyes reflecting the urgency in their faces. Commander, Jeffrey said, we need your help to infiltrate the neutral zone. Vega's in danger. Zaxthor didn't hesitate. I know a way through the maintenance tunnels, but we'll need backup. Within minutes, they had assembled a small team of trusted security personnel. As they entered the dimly lit tunnels, Jeffrey felt a mix of purpose and apprehension. The walls seemed to close in around them, the air thick with tension. Suddenly, a shadow moved ahead. Jeffrey barely had time to shout a warning before a group of mercenaries burst from a side passage. The confined space erupted into a flurry of fists and bodies. Jeffrey found himself grappling with a burly Centaurian. He ducked under a wild swing, using the attacker's momentum to flip him over his shoulder. The move, part of the combat training he'd received on Nexus Prime, caught the mercenary off guard. Beside him, Vega moved with lethal grace, her strikes precise and devastating. Zaxthor's multiple limbs were a blur as he subdued two attackers simultaneously. As the last mercenary fell, Jeffrey wiped sweat from his brow. Everyone okay? A chorus of affirmatives answered him. They pressed on, the encounter having cost them valuable time. Jeffrey's worry for Vega grew with each passing moment. What if they were too late? Finally, they reached the entrance to the meeting room. A sophisticated security system guarded the door, its holographic interface pulsing with warning symbols. Jeffrey tapped his comm unit. Dr. Novak, we need your expertise. The doctor's voice came through, tinny but clear. I see it. Give me a moment. There, I've created a bypass, but you'll need to enter the final code manually. Jeffrey stepped forward, his diplomatic training kicking in. He straightened his posture, adopting the imperious air of a high-ranking official. With a deep breath, he punched in a series of numbers. The door hissed open. Inside, the scene froze Jeffrey in his tracks. Zar-El stood at the center of the room, a plasma pistol aimed squarely at Vega's head. The Xindi's eyes widened in surprise, then narrowed with calculation. "Ah, Mr. Davis," Zar-El said, his mandibles clicking. "How kind of you to join us. We were just discussing Agent Vega's future." Jeffrey's mind raced, assessing the situation. He raised his hand slowly, his voice steady as he addressed the Xindi. "Zar-El, we know about your involvement in the conspiracy. It's over." Zar-El's grip on the pistol tightened. "You understand nothing, human. What we're doing is for the greater good of the galaxy." "Is it?" Jeffrey took a careful step forward. "We have evidence, Zar-El. Concrete proof of your actions, your communications with other conspirators. Do you really think you can silence all of us?" Doubt flickered in Zar-El's eyes. Jeffrey pressed his advantage, his voice taking on the persuasive tone that had served him well in countless negotiations. "Think about your position, your reputation. There's still a way out of this, but it starts with you putting down that weapon." For a moment, the room was silent save for the hum of the station's systems. Then, almost imperceptibly, Zar-El's arm lowered a fraction. It was all the opening Vega needed. In a blur of motion, she twisted, her hand striking Zar-El's wrist. The pistol clattered to the floor as Vega swept the Xindi's legs out from under him. Jeffrey and the security team surged forward, quickly subduing Zar-El. As Zaxthor secured the prisoner, Jeffrey pulled Vega into a tight embrace. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice rough with emotion. Vega nodded against his chest. "I'm fine. But Jeffrey, the things Zar-El told me, this conspiracy goes deeper than we imagined." Before Jeffrey could respond, his comm unit buzzed. Ambassador Holloway's voice filled the room. "Davis, report. What's the situation?" Jeffrey straightened, his arm still around Vega. "Sir, we've apprehended Zar-El. He's confirmed as a key player in the conspiracy." There was a pause, then Holloway spoke again, his tone a mix of relief and purpose. "Excellent work. Bring him in for questioning immediately. And Davis, well done." As they prepared to leave, Jeffrey caught Vega's eye. The connection between them felt stronger than ever, tempered by the danger they'd faced together. But there was no time to dwell on it now. They had a prisoner to interrogate, a conspiracy to unravel, and a galaxy to save. With Zar-El in custody, Jeffrey knew that their next steps would be crucial. The information they could extract from him might be the key to unraveling the entire conspiracy. As they made their way back through the station, Jeffrey's mind was already racing ahead, preparing for the challenges that lay before them. As they escorted Zar-El back to the embassy, Jeffrey's comm unit buzzed again. This time, it was Dr. Novak's urgent voice that filled the air. "Jeffrey, Vega, we have a critical situation." The doctor's words tumbled out in a rush. "Our systems have detected the activation of sleeper agents across multiple worlds. Earth is their primary target." Jeffrey and Vega exchanged a look of alarm. The implications were staggering. "Understood, Doctor," Jeffrey replied, his mind already shifting into high gear. "We're on our way." They quickened their pace, practically dragging Zar-El along with them. As they entered the embassy, they found Ambassador Holloway already mobilizing resources. "Davis, Vega, good timing," Holloway said, his face grim. "We're assembling a joint human-alien task force to address this threat. I need you both to lead it." Within hours, Jeffrey and Vega found themselves aboard the Stellar Hawk, a sleek interstellar vessel capable of reaching Earth in a matter of days. The ship hummed with activity as operatives from various species prepared for the mission ahead. In the ship's command center, Jeffrey and Vega pored over the data provided by Dr. Novak. Holographic displays flickered with potential targets and suspected sleeper agent locations on Earth. "If we correlate these energy signatures with known sympathizer hideouts," Vega said, her fingers dancing across the interface, "we can narrow down their likely staging areas." Jeffrey nodded, adding his own insights. "And based on our intelligence from Zar-El's interrogation, we can predict their command structure. They'll likely target key infrastructure first." Their complementary skills meshed seamlessly, Jeffrey's diplomatic acumen blending with Vega's military expertise to form a comprehensive strategy. The other task force members watched in admiration as the couple worked in perfect sync. As they approached the Sol system, a distress signal crackled through the ship's communications array. A voice, tense with fear, echoed through the command center. "This is Mars Colony 1. We're under attack. Sleeper agents have compromised our life support systems. Please, we need immediate assistance." The command center erupted into a flurry of activity. Jeffrey locked eyes with Captain Thax, the Stellar Hawk's Andorian pilot. "How long to reach Mars?" Jeffrey asked, his voice tight. Thax's antennae twitched as he calculated. "We can be there in 2 hours, but it'll delay our arrival at Earth by at least a day." Jeffrey's expression resolute. Every moment they delayed could cost lives on Earth, but he couldn't abandon the Mars colonists. He made his decision. "Set course for Mars, maximum speed," he ordered. As they approached the red planet, the scene that greeted them was one of chaos. The sleeper agents, a mix of humans and aliens, had seized control of the main environmental facility. Atmosphere vents spewed clouds of pressurized air into the thin Martian atmosphere, while fires raged unchecked in several habitation domes. Jeffrey quickly divided the task force. "Vega, take a strike team and secure the life support systems. I'll lead a team to retake the command center." Vega nodded, her eyes shining with dedication. "Be careful," she said, squeezing his hand before moving to assemble her team. Jeffrey led his group through the airlock and into the Martian colony. The low gravity made their movements awkward, each step threatening to send them bouncing off course. They navigated through corridors filled with panicked colonists, some eyeing the alien members of the task force with suspicion. "We're here to help," Jeffrey assured them, his diplomatic training kicking in. "Please remain calm and follow the evacuation protocols." As they approached the command center, they encountered resistance. Sleeper agents, their eyes wild with fanaticism, opened fire. Jeffrey and his team took cover behind overturned furniture, returning fire with non-lethal stun weapons. Across the colony, Vega's team faced their own challenges. The life support control room was a maze of pipes and control panels, each one potentially booby-trapped. Vega moved with caution, her keen senses alert for any sign of danger. A warning klaxon blared through the facility. "Oxygen levels critical in sectors 3 through 7, an automated voice announced. "Evacuate immediately." Vega quickened her pace, knowing that hundreds of lives hung in the balance. She rounded a corner and came face to face with a group of sleeper agents. The fight was brutal and swift. Vega's combat training kicked in, her body moving almost on instinct. She ducked under a wild swing, used her attacker's momentum to flip him over her shoulder, and then spun to deliver a devastating kick to another agent's solar plexus. In the command center, Jeffrey's team had finally broken through the enemy's defenses. They stormed the room, quickly subduing the remaining sleeper agents. Jeffrey raced to the main console, his fingers flying over the controls as he worked to restore order to the colony's systems. As the situation stabilized, Jeffrey received a transmission from Vega. "Life support secured," she reported, slightly out of breath. "But Jeffrey, we found something. Plans for a coordinated attack on Earth's major cities. It's set to begin within hours." Jeffrey's blood ran cold. "Understood. Get your team back to the Stellar Hawk. We need to move." As the task force regrouped aboard their ship, Jeffrey and Vega huddled over the new intelligence. The information revealed the existence of a central command structure for the sleeper agents, hidden in an underwater base in Earth's Pacific Ocean. "We've accelerated their timeline," Vega said, her voice grim. "They know we're coming now." Jeffrey nodded, his mind racing. "Then we'll have to be faster. We're dropping into a war zone when we reach Earth." As the Stellar Hawk broke Earth's atmosphere, Jeffrey and Vega shared a quiet moment in their quarters. They stood close, foreheads touching, drawing strength from each other's presence. "Whatever happens down there," Jeffrey said softly, "I've got your back." Vega's lips curved in a small smile. "And I've got yours." They suited up in silence, each movement practiced and precise. As they joined the rest of the task force in the ship's hangar, Jeffrey surveyed the determined faces around him. Humans stood shoulder to shoulder with aliens, united in purpose. The hangar doors opened, revealing the blue expanse of Earth below. Jeffrey took a deep breath, steeling himself for the battle ahead. At his side, Vega stood ready, her presence a comforting constant. Together they led the charge, leaping into the unknown. The fate of Earth and the future of human-alien relations hung in the balance as they plummeted towards the planet's surface, ready to face whatever challenges awaited them. As they plummeted towards Earth's surface, Jeffrey and Vega's eyes met, a silent understanding passing between them. The moment of connection was short-lived as the planet's atmosphere engulfed them, the heat of re-entry turning the air around them into a fiery cocoon. The task force's drop pods scattered across the globe, each team vectoring towards their assigned targets. Jeffrey's pod angled towards Washington, D.C., while Vega's trajectory took her towards New York City. Commander Zaxthor's team veered west, their destination the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean. Jeffrey's pod touched down with a bone-jarring thud in the heart of the nation's capital. As the hatch hissed open, he was immediately assaulted by the cacophony of a city in chaos. Sirens wailed in the distance, and the acrid smell of smoke filled his nostrils. "Alpha Team, form up!" Jeffrey called out, his voice cutting through the din. As his team assembled around him, he took in the scene. The normally pristine streets were littered with debris, and in the distance, plumes of black smoke rose from several government buildings. Jeffrey's comm unit crackled to life. "This is General Hawkins of Earth Defense Command. Who's in charge of this operation?" "This is Jeffrey Davis, leading the Joint Task Force," Jeffrey responded, his diplomatic training kicking in. "We're here to help, General. What's the situation?" "It's a mess, Davis," Hawkins growled. "Sleeper agents have infiltrated the Pentagon and the White House. We're barely holding on to the Capitol building." Jeffrey's mind raced, formulating a plan. "Understood, General. We'll establish a joint command center at the Capitol. Can you meet us there?" As Alpha Team made their way through the chaotic streets, Jeffrey couldn't help but worry about Vega. He pushed the thought aside, focusing on the task at hand. Across the country, Vega's pod slammed into the concrete jungle of New York City. The moment she emerged, she was met with the staccato of gunfire. Beta Team quickly took cover behind the twisted wreckage of abandoned vehicles. "Sit rep!" Vega barked, her eyes scanning the urban battlefield before her. A nearby skyscraper erupted in a ball of flame, showering the street with debris. One of her team members, a Rigelian with enhanced vision, pointed towards the Empire State Building. "Heavy concentration of hostiles, fortifying major landmarks," the alien reported. Vega nodded, her tactical mind already formulating a strategy. "We'll split into two-person cells, use the subway tunnels to outflank them. Watch for booby traps and stay in constant communication." As Beta Team melted into the urban landscape, Vega led her cell towards the nearest subway entrance. The familiar weight of her plasma rifle was comforting as they descended into the darkness below the city. Meanwhile, Commander Zaxthor's Gamma Team hovered above the Pacific Ocean. The Andorian's antennae twitched as he studied the holographic display before him. "Anomalous energy readings detected near the Mariana Trench," reported his science officer, a Vulcan whose stoic demeanor belied the gravity of the situation. Zaxthor's mandibles clicked in anticipation. "Prepare the submersibles. We're going in." As the sleek, alien-crafted vessels slipped beneath the waves, Zaxthor couldn't shake the feeling that they were diving into the maw of the beast itself. Back in Washington, Jeffrey and his team had successfully secured the Capitol building. The Grand Rotunda had been transformed into a makeshift command center, with holographic displays showing real-time battle data from around the globe. General Hawkins strode in, his uniform disheveled but his eyes sharp. "Davis, we've got a new problem. Our long-range communications are being jammed." Before Jeffrey could respond, an aide burst into the room. "Sir, we've traced the source of the interference. It's coming from the Smithsonian." Jeffrey's eyes widened as he realized the implications. The sleeper agents must have activated some kind of alien artifact. We need to shut it down. Assembling a small squad, Jeffrey led them towards the museum complex. The streets were eerily quiet, the usual bustle of tourists replaced by the occasional burst of distant gunfire. As they approached the Smithsonian, Jeffrey's comm unit crackled to life. It was Vega, her voice tight with tension. "Jeffrey, we've made a breakthrough in New York. We've captured a high-ranking sleeper agent. There's a kill switch, but it's in the underwater base. And Jeffrey, it needs both human and Xindi DNA to activate." Jeffrey's heart raced as he processed the information. "Understood, Vega. We'll regroup as soon as we can. Stay safe." As he signed off, Jeffrey turned to his team, his expression resolute. "Let's move. We've got an artifact to disable, and then a date with destiny in the Pacific." The squad moved forward, their footsteps echoing through the empty halls of the Smithsonian. Somewhere in this vast repository of human knowledge and achievement lay the key to Earth's survival. And beyond that, beneath the waves of the Pacific, waited their final challenge. Jeffrey gripped his weapon tighter, his thoughts turning to Vega and the trials that lay ahead. Whatever came next, he knew they would face it together. Together. The moment stretched, heavy with unspoken promises and shared grit. A sharp crackle from Jeffrey's comm unit broke the silence. "Davis, this is Zaxthor. We've located the underwater base. Sending coordinates now." Jeffrey's eyes met Vega's. "Time to move," he said, his voice low and intense. They sprinted to the nearest transport, their footsteps echoing through the now quiet halls of the Smithsonian. As they raced towards the rendezvous point, Jeffrey briefed his team on the new intelligence. The Stellar Hawk's engines roared to life as they approached, its sleek form hovering just above the churning waves of the Atlantic. Jeffrey and Vega boarded swiftly, joining Commander Zaxthor on the bridge. The Andorian's antennae twitched with agitation. "We're detecting heavy defenses around the base perimeter. This won't be an easy insertion." Jeffrey nodded grimly. "We'll find a way. We have to." As they neared the coordinates, the ship's sensors picked up the unmistakable energy signatures of weapons fire. Zaxthor's team was already engaged in battle at the base's outer airlock. "We need to get down there," Vega said, her voice tight with urgency. Jeffrey's mind raced, analyzing the situation. "The main entrance is too hot. We need another way in." His eyes scanned the holographic display of the base's structure. "There," he pointed. "Maintenance tunnels. They're flooded, but with our diving gear, we can bypass the main confrontation." Vega nodded, already moving towards the equipment locker. "Let's gear up." Minutes later, they plunged into the icy Pacific waters. The pressure intensified as they descended, the darkness broken only by the beams of their underwater lights. They navigated through a maze of tunnels, the sound of their breathing loud in the confines of their helmets. As they swam, they encountered a series of security measures. A laser grid blocked their path, its deadly beams visible even in the murky water. Jeffrey gestured to a nearby control panel. Understanding immediately, Vega swam to it, her fingers working deftly to bypass the human-designed security protocols. Meanwhile, Jeffrey focused on disabling the Xindi components of the system. Their teamwork paid off as the grid flickered and died, allowing them to pass. They pressed on, overcoming each obstacle they encountered with their combined skills and knowledge. Deeper into the base, they reached an airlock. As the water drained away, they removed their helmets, the taste of recycled air sharp in their lungs. Jeffrey's comm unit crackled to life with Zaxthor's voice, distorted by interference. "Davis, we're pinned down. Heavy fire. Can't advance." "Hold your position, Commander," Jeffrey responded. "We're inside. We'll find the kill switch." They moved swiftly through the corridors, their footsteps echoing ominously. Suddenly, alarms blared, and a computerized voice announced, "Intruder alert, activating emergency protocols." The floor beneath them began to shift, panels sliding away to reveal a rapidly filling water reservoir. Jeffrey and Vega found themselves in a chamber rapidly flooding with seawater. "The gear!" Vega shouted, but it was too late. Their diving equipment had been swept away by the initial surge of water. The water level rose alarmingly fast, already reaching their waists. Jeffrey spotted a control panel on the far wall. "There!" he shouted over the rush of water. "We need to override it." They waded through the rising water, fighting against the current. Vega reached the panel first, her fingers flying over the controls. "It's not responding to my biosignature," she called out. Jeffrey joined her, water now lapping at their chests. "It must need both of us," he said, placing his hand next to hers on the scanner. For a heart-stopping moment, nothing happened. Then, with a grinding sound, the water began to recede. They sagged against each other in relief, catching their breath. "We need to keep moving," Vega said, her voice husky from exertion. They pressed on, their clothes soaked and their movements hampered by the waterlogged corridors. As they approached the central hub, the sound of footsteps echoed ahead. They ducked into an alcove just as a group of guards rounded the corner. Jeffrey's breath caught in his throat. The guards were unlike anything he'd seen before, clearly genetically enhanced, with features that blended human and Xindi characteristics. Their eyes glowed with an unnatural light, scanning the corridor with inhuman precision. Vega tensed beside him, her hand instinctively reaching for her weapon. But before they could formulate a plan, one of the guards sniffed the air, turning towards their hiding spot with a snarl. "Intruders!" the guard roared, his voice a guttural mix of human and alien tones. In an instant, the corridor erupted into chaos. Vega sprang into action, her military training evident in every fluid movement. She engaged two guards at once, her fists and feet striking with precision and power. Jeffrey found himself face to face with a guard whose strength far surpassed his own. He ducked under a powerful swing, his eyes darting around for anything he could use as a weapon. Spotting a loose piece of piping, he rolled, snatching it up and swinging it with all his might. The fight was brutal and swift. Vega moved like a whirlwind, taking down opponent after opponent. Jeffrey held his own, using his environment and quick thinking to overcome the guard's superior strength. But as the last guard fell, Jeffrey felt a searing pain in his leg. He looked down to see a deep gash, blood already soaking through his torn pants. Vega was at his side in an instant, her face etched with concern. "Jeffrey," she breathed, her hands already moving to examine the wound. He gritted his teeth against the pain. "I'm all right. We need to keep moving." Vega's eyes hardened with commitment. She quickly fashioned a makeshift bandage from a strip of her uniform, her touch gentle despite the urgency of their situation. As she worked, their eyes met. In that moment, amid the chaos and danger, something unspoken passed between them. A deepening of their bond, a silent acknowledgement of what they meant to each other. But there was no time to dwell on it. Earth's fate hung in the balance, and they had a mission to complete. With Vega's support, Jeffrey limped forward, each step a testament to his tenacity. They reached the central control room, finding it eerily quiet and unguarded. The kill switch console stood in the center, its sleek design a stark contrast to the utilitarian surroundings. As they approached, a holographic interface flickered to life. It requested simultaneous DNA authentication from both a human and a Xindi, along with a complex activation sequence. Jeffrey and Vega exchanged a look, understanding the implications. They were the key to stopping the sleeper agents and saving Earth. As they reached for the console, a cold voice cut through the silence. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." They spun to see a figure emerge from a hidden chamber. The alien's blue skin and elongated features marked him as an Arcturian, but his eyes held a fanatical gleam that sent a chill down Jeffrey's spine. "Krelvor, I presume," Jeffrey said, his voice steady despite the pain in his leg. The Arcturian smiled, a cruel twist of his lips. "Indeed, and you've come all this way for nothing." He raised an advanced energy weapon, its core pulsing with hardly restrained power. "That kill switch is more than it seems. Activate it, and this entire base will self-destruct. The resulting explosion would devastate the ocean floor, causing tsunamis that would destroy coastal cities around the Pacific Rim." Jeffrey's mind raced, weighing their options. The fate of Earth balanced on a knife's edge, with their decision in this moment determining the future of humanity and its place in the galactic community. Alarms blared suddenly, indicating that Zaxthor's team was close to breaching the final defenses. Time was running out. Jeffrey looked at Vega, seeing his own persistence reflected in her eyes. In that silent exchange, they made their choice. Together, they turned back to the console, their hands poised over the activation controls. Krelvor's voice rose in anger. "Stop! You'll doom us all!" But Jeffrey and Vega stood firm, ready to make the ultimate sacrifice to complete their mission and save Earth. The control room crackled with tension as they prepared to activate the device that would determine the fate of the planet and potentially cost them their lives. In that moment, Jeffrey and Vega locked eyes, a silent understanding passing between them. They had come too far to turn back now. With a shared nod, they pressed their palms onto the DNA scanners simultaneously. The console hummed to life, its surface glowing as it processed their biometric data. Jeffrey's fingers flew over the keypad, inputting the complex activation sequence they had memorized. Krelvor's face contorted with rage. "No!" he roared, lunging forward with surprising speed. Despite the searing pain in his injured leg, Jeffrey reacted instinctively. He threw himself at the Arcturian, tackling him mid-stride. They crashed to the floor in a tangle of limbs, Jeffrey using every ounce of his strength to keep Krelvor from reaching the console. "Vega, finish it!" Jeffrey shouted, grappling with the alien's surprisingly powerful form. Vega's hands were a blur over the controls, her eyes darting between the complex sequence and the struggle unfolding beside her. Sweat beaded on her forehead as she raced against time, the weight of Earth's fate heavy on her shoulders. Krelvor thrashed beneath Jeffrey, his elbow catching Jeffrey in the ribs. Jeffrey wheezed but held on, using his body weight to pin the Arcturian down. He could hear Vega's rapid breathing, the beeping of the console and the pounding of his own heart in his ears. "Almost there," Vega muttered, her fingers dancing across the keypad. With a surge of strength, Krelvor managed to free one arm. He reached for the energy weapon at his hip, his fingers closing around the grip. "Vega, look out!" Jeffrey yelled, spotting the threat. Vega's hand slammed down on the final key, just as Krelvor aimed his weapon. The energy blast sizzled through the air, missing Vega by inches and striking the console. Sparks erupted from the damaged panel, acrid smoke filling the air. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then a low hum began to build, resonating through the entire base. The kill switch had activated. "No, no, no!" Krelvor wailed, his struggles ceasing as the reality of his defeat set in. Jeffrey released his hold on the Arcturian, stumbling to his feet. He limped to Vega's side, both of them watching the console with suspenseful pause. Suddenly, alarms blared throughout the facility. A computerized voice echoed through the corridors. "Warning, self-destruct sequence initiated. All personnel evacuate immediately." The floor beneath them shuddered, the entire base groaning like a wounded beast. Blast doors slammed shut around them, sealing off the control room. "You fools!" Krelvor spat, rising to his feet. "You've doomed us all." Jeffrey and Vega exchanged glances, the gravity of their situation sinking in. They were trapped in a base set to explode, with the very alien they had been fighting against. "How long do we have?" Vega asked, her voice tight with tension. "Minutes," Krelvor replied, his earlier bravado replaced by grim resignation. "And there's no way out. These blast doors are designed to withstand the force of the explosion." Jeffrey's mind raced, scanning the room for any possible escape route. His eyes fell on a maintenance hatch near the floor, partially hidden behind a row of computer banks. "There," he said, pointing. "The waste disposal system. It might lead to an emergency exit." Vega was already moving, her enhanced Xindi strength allowing her to easily shift the heavy equipment blocking their path. She gripped the edges of the hatch, muscles straining as she pried it open. "It's sealed shut," she grunted, the metal groaning under her efforts. Krelvor stepped forward, his expression unreadable. "Allow me," he said, producing a small device from his pocket. He pressed it against the hatch's locking mechanism, and with a soft click, the seal disengaged. Jeffrey raised an eyebrow at the Arcturian. "Why help us now?" Krelvor's lips twisted in a wry smile. "Because I have no desire to die here, and you two seem to have an annoying knack for survival." Another violent tremor shook the base, reminding them of the urgency of their situation. Without further discussion, they plunged into the narrow tunnel of the waste disposal system. The passage was tight and dark, the air thick with the smell of chemicals and decay. They crawled on hands and knees, guided only by the dim emergency lights that flickered along the tunnel's length. Water began to seep in through cracks in the walls, a grim reminder of the ocean's crushing pressure waiting to claim them. The base's structure groaned and creaked around them, threatening to give way at any moment. "There's a junction ahead," Krelvor called from the rear. "One path leads to the escape pod bay, the other to a maintenance airlock." They reached the split in the tunnel, faced with a critical decision and precious little time to make it. "We'll take the escape pod route," Jeffrey decided quickly. "Krelvor, you—" But the Arcturian was already moving towards the other tunnel. "I'll take my chances with the airlock," he said. "But before we part ways, know this. What you've done here today isn't the end. There are contingencies in place, backup plans you can't even begin to imagine." "What are you talking about?" Vega demanded. Krelvor's eyes gleamed in the dim light. "The conspiracy runs deeper than you know. Look to the Orion Syndicate. They've been moving prohibited Xindi artifacts through Andorian space, and beware the shadow organization within Starfleet intelligence. Not everyone wearing a uniform is on your side." Before they could press him for more information, another violent shake of the base sent debris raining down on them. Krelvor disappeared down his chosen path without another word. Jeffrey and Vega pressed on, the tunnel becoming increasingly treacherous as more water poured in. They emerged into the escape pod bay, a cavernous room lined with sleek, egg-shaped vessels. "There!" Vega shouted, pointing to one of the few remaining pods. They sprinted across the bay, water sloshing around their ankles. Jeffrey's injured leg screamed in protest, but adrenaline pushed him forward. They reached the pod just as a deafening rumble shook the entire facility. Vega all but threw Jeffrey into the pod before leaping in herself. Her hands flew over the controls, initiating the launch sequence. With a pneumatic hiss, the pod's hatch sealed shut. "Hang on!" Vega yelled as she slammed her palm down on the launch button. The pod shot out of the bay like a cork from a bottle, just as the underwater base began to implode behind them. The shock wave of the explosion caught them, sending their small vessel tumbling through the water. Jeffrey gritted his teeth, fighting waves of nausea as they spun wildly. Vega wrestled with the controls, struggling to stabilize their ascent. After what felt like an eternity, they broke the surface, bouncing roughly on the waves of the Pacific Ocean. As the pod settled, Jeffrey and Vega sat in stunned silence, the realization of what they had just survived slowly sinking in. The kill switch had been activated, the sleeper agents neutralized, and the underwater base destroyed. But at what cost? Jeffrey activated the pod's emergency beacon, then turned to the communication system. News reports were already flooding in, describing the sudden collapse of the sleeper agent network around the globe. Their mission had been a success, but as Krelvor's parting words echoed in his mind, Jeffrey knew this was just getting started. He looked at Vega, seeing his own mix of exhaustion, relief, and apprehension mirrored in her eyes. They had won this battle, but the war for Earth's future was just beginning to take shape. As a distant ship appeared on the horizon, its outline growing clearer against the setting sun, Jeffrey and Vega braced themselves for the challenges that lay ahead. The activation of the kill switch had changed everything, and they knew that the repercussions of their actions would reshape the landscape of human-alien relations for years to come. As the rescue ship drew closer, Jeffrey turned to Vega, his expression a mix of relief and persistence. "We made it," he said, his voice hoarse from exhaustion. "But this is just the beginning." Vega nodded, her eyes reflecting the same grit. "Whatever comes next, we face it together." The rescue operation was swift and efficient. Within hours, Jeffrey and Vega found themselves in a secure facility on the island of Oahu, Hawaii. The stark white walls and constant hum of medical equipment were a jarring contrast to the chaos they had just escaped. As doctors tended to Jeffrey's injured leg and ran a battery of tests on both of them, Agent Holloway strode into the room, his face a mask of controlled urgency. "Good work out there," he said, his tone clipped. "The kill switch activation was a success. We've neutralized most of the sleeper agents worldwide." Jeffrey sat up straighter, wincing slightly at the movement. "Most?" Holloway's expression darkened. "That's where things get complicated. The information Krelvor gave you before you parted ways? It's proving to be accurate. We've uncovered evidence of a backup plan." Vega leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "What kind of backup plan?" Before Holloway could answer, a commotion in the hallway drew their attention. Dr. Lyra Novak burst into the room, her usual composure replaced by an air of impossibly strong excitement. "You're not going to believe what we've found," she said, her eyes wide as she clutched a data pad to her chest. Holloway raised an eyebrow. "Dr. Novak, this is hardly the time." "It's exactly the time," Lyra interrupted, turning her pad to face them. "We've decoded more of the data from the underwater base. There's a space station hidden in the outer reaches of our solar system, and it's armed to the teeth." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Jeffrey exchanged a glance with Vega, seeing his own growing apprehension mirrored in her eyes. "How bad are we talking?" Jeffrey asked, his voice low. Lyra's expression was grim. "Bad enough to pose a significant threat to Earth. If the remaining conspirators get control of that station—" She didn't need to finish the sentence. The weight of this new threat settled heavily on their shoulders. Holloway paced the small room, his mind clearly racing. "This changes everything. The global summit is set to begin in a week. World leaders are gathering to address the new reality of human-alien relations. We can't let this threat hang over our heads." He turned to Jeffrey and Vega, his gaze intense. "We need you too. Your experience, your combined knowledge of human and Xindi technology, it's our best shot at neutralizing this station before the summit begins." Jeffrey looked at Vega, seeing the same mix of commitment and trepidation he felt. They had just survived a harrowing ordeal, and now they were being asked to plunge into another dangerous mission. "When do we leave?" Vega asked, her voice steady. Holloway's lips quirked in a humorless smile. "As soon as the doctors clear you, we're assembling a team. Commander Zaxthor has already volunteered." As Holloway left to make preparations, Jeffrey and Vega found themselves alone with Dr. Novak. The scientist's earlier excitement had faded, replaced by a look of concern. "There's something else you should know," Lyra said, her voice low. "Your relationship, it's become a point of public interest. Some see it as a beacon of hope for human-alien cooperation. Others—" She trailed off, her implication clear. Jeffrey reached out, taking Vega's hand in his. "Let them talk. We have more important things to focus on." Vega squeezed his hand, a silent affirmation of their bond. As they began to discuss the details of the upcoming mission, the reality of their situation sank in. They were about to embark on a journey to the edge of the solar system, facing unknown dangers and potentially shaping the future of human-alien relations. The next few days passed in a blur of preparations. Jeffrey and Vega underwent intensive briefings, studied the latest intelligence on the hidden space station, and familiarized themselves with the advanced stealth vessel that would carry them on their mission. On the eve of their departure, they stood on a balcony overlooking the Pacific, the same ocean that had nearly claimed their lives just days before. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant hues of orange and pink. "You ready for this?" Jeffrey asked, his voice soft. Vega turned to him, her eyes reflecting the fading sunlight. "As ready as I'll ever be." "You?" Jeffrey nodded, pulling her close. They stood in silence for a moment, drawing strength from each other's presence. Tomorrow, they would leave Earth behind, venturing into the dark unknown of space. But for now, they had this moment of peace, a calm before the storm that was sure to come. As the last rays of sunlight disappeared below the horizon, they made their way back inside. The mission awaited, and with it, the fate of two worlds hung in the balance. Balance. As the last light faded from view, Jeffrey and Vega steeled themselves for the challenges that lay ahead. The next morning, they boarded the sleek stealth vessel alongside Commander Zaxthor and a hand-picked team of specialists. As they left Earth's atmosphere, the enormity of their mission settled over them like a heavy cloak. Days of tense space travel followed, punctuated by strategy sessions and equipment checks. Finally, they approached the hidden station, its massive form barely visible against the inky backdrop of space. "There it is," Zaxthor growled, his reptilian eyes narrowing. "Our scans confirm it's dripping with enough firepower to level a continent." Jeffrey and Vega exchanged a meaningful look. In that silent moment, a plan crystallized between them. "We need to neutralize those weapons," Vega said, her voice low and determined. Jeffrey nodded, already thinking several steps ahead. "And we can't let that database fall into the wrong hands. We'll need to extract it." As they approached the station under cloak, Jeffrey outlined their strategy to the team. They would split into two groups, one to download the crucial information, the other to sabotage the weapon systems. The infiltration went smoothly at first. Using the advanced tech provided by Starfleet intelligence, they bypassed the initial security measures and entered the station undetected. But as they made their way deeper into the facility, alarms began to blare. "They've made us!" Zaxthor shouted over the din. "We need to move fast!" Jeffrey sprinted toward the central database, his fingers flying over the interface as he initiated the download. Nearby, Vega and two other team members worked with practiced efficiency, planting explosive charges at key structural points. The station shook as the first explosions ripped through its superstructure. Smoke filled the corridors, and the sounds of approaching security forces echoed off the metal walls. "Download at 60%, Jeffrey called out, his eyes never leaving the screen. Vega finished setting the last charge and moved to cover the entrance to the room. "We've got company." The air crackled with weapons fire as station security burst into the corridor. Vega's enhanced reflexes allowed her to duck and weave, returning fire with deadly accuracy. But they were outnumbered and outgunned. Jeffrey's mind raced, searching for a solution. He caught sight of a group of station personnel cowering behind a bulkhead, fear evident in their eyes. "Wait!" he shouted, stepping into view with his hands raised. "You don't know what you're fighting for." His words gave the security team pause. In that moment of hesitation, Jeffrey launched into an impassioned explanation of the conspiracy, revealing the true nature of the station's purpose and the danger it posed to Earth. To his amazement, his words struck a chord. Several of the station's crew lowered their weapons, turning to face their comrades with newfound perseverance. "He's telling the truth," one of them said. "I've seen things, documents that didn't add up. We can't be part of this." The tide of the battle shifted as some of the station's personnel joined Jeffrey and Vega's side. With their help, they fought their way back toward their extraction point, the downloaded database secure in Jeffrey's possession. As they neared their stealth vessel, a commanding voice rang out over the chaos. "Stop right there!" The station's commander stood before them, flanked by his most loyal guards. His face was a mask of fury as he raised his weapon. Jeffrey and Vega moved in perfect synchronization, years of training and shared experiences culminating in this moment. Vega launched herself forward, using her superior strength and agility to disarm two of the guards. Meanwhile, Jeffrey feinted left, drawing the commander's fire before ducking and sweeping his legs out from under him. In a matter of seconds, the commander and his remaining guards were subdued. Jeffrey and Vega shared a brief, triumphant glance before racing the final meters to their ship. The team piled in, adrenaline still coursing through their veins. As Zaxthor detached from the station, they watched through the view screen as the structure began to break apart, consumed by the explosions they had set in motion. "We did it," Vega breathed, her hand finding Jeffrey's as they stared at the disintegrating station. But there was no time to savor their victory. With the database secured and the immediate threat neutralized, their thoughts turned to the upcoming summit and the monumental task that lay ahead, reshaping human-alien relations in the wake of this conspiracy. As they set course for Earth, Jeffrey began to compose his thoughts for the speech he would deliver. The data they had retrieved would be crucial in exposing the full extent of the plot and paving the way for a new era of cooperation. Vega watched him work, a mix of pride and love swelling in her chest. They had come so far since their first encounter, facing countless dangers and overcoming seemingly insurmountable odds. Now, on the cusp of a new chapter for both their species, she couldn't help but wonder what the future held for them, personally. As if sensing her thoughts, Jeffrey looked up from his work and smiled. "Whatever comes next," he said softly, echoing her words from days ago, "we face it together." The ship sped towards Earth, carrying with it the hope for a brighter, more unified future. But as Jeffrey and Vega well knew, the road ahead would be far from easy. New challenges awaited them on the ground as they prepared to confront the political realities of their mission and the lingering threats that still lurked in the shadows.
If you finished this story, please subscribe and like the video. Then leave a comment that says, "I liked the story," and I will heart every single one of them. It really helps me. Thank you for your time.